Hey team, spending some time out here with Riggs, and just thought we'd talk a little story. Maybe some lessons learned, thinking about things over the years. You know, I originally came in the service in the Marine Corps in 1995, and I served 8 years, and then got out and had a 7-year break. And in 2010, ended up coming back into the service. And so I've seen before 9/11, and I've seen as a civilian a lot of the war, and of course coming back in, I've deployed a couple times. And I hear folks say all the time, you know, that things have changed, that things used to be different back in the day. Well, most of those people who are saying that are either not in now, or they never served back in the day. And so in the 90s, I think, you know, we were really focused on training and preparing for a wartime mission. Did a lot of time in the field. I was in an anti-terrorism unit, so it was a little bit of low speed, high drag, if you will. A little bit of the opposite, but it's all good. Things were different back then in some respects. And it's not that things were different in black and white, right? You know, putting your hands on somebody has never been authorized by doctrine or regulation in any branch of the service. Whether we're talking about in basic training or in boot camp, whether we're talking about in an operational unit. But there was a time when young Corporal and young Sergeant Stoker was a little bit of a mad dog, if you will. And I did some things that, you know, if done today, would probably get me hemmed up a little bit. You know, we were preparing for a room inspection, and it was post the field, and this one dude, he failed his inspection. And so I gave him a period of time to get ready. We're going to do a junk on the bunk layout. And so what that was all of his what we would call TA-50, right? All of his issued items were going to be laid out on his rack in his room, and his wall locker was going to be opened up, and I was going to inspect all of his uniforms. He was going to be in his service uniform, his greens, and so I was going to be in the same uniform as well, because I believe, as crazy as this sounds, that if I'm going to inspect somebody in a uniform, I should be in the same uniform, right? Does that make sense? So I'm sitting in the platoon office, and I'm getting dressed, and I fix my tie, and I put on my coat, and I go walking down the catwalk. He lived on the second floor, and our barracks was in a horseshoe, if you will. We had a common area down in the middle, and I'm walking around, and it was an outside catwalk, lanai, or whatever you want to call it. And I go to his room, and I open up his door, and he's nowhere near ready. Now, mind you, I had given him weeks to get ready. Weeks. And I open up the door, I'm like, hey, what the hell is going on in here? Right? I see crap all over the place. His wall locker is open, but it's not set up. And he's sitting over there ironing his uniform, trying to get it ready. His shirt. So I start laying into him pretty hot and pretty heavy, if you will. Saying a bunch of words that are strongly discouraged. And I start laying into him, and I'm like, I've had enough, man. And I start looking around, and I see this. He has got two wall lockers, one with his uniform that's kind of set up but not finished, and the other one is a little bit open. And I go and I open up this locker, and his crap comes falling out. I'm like, oh, what do we have here? So I start shaking out all his gear, his Alice pack, and inside his Alice pack, of course, we came back from the field a few weeks ago. He's got some dirty laundry up in here. I'm like, you nasty, dirty son of a... And I take this one trash bag and I shake it out, and then I grab a shelter half pole. Now, a shelter half was our two-man tents that we had back in the day. They were canvas, a little large, a little heavy. And each battle buddy had a half, and then everybody had 3 tent pegs, a line, and like 5 stakes or something like that. And so I take one of his tent pegs and I shake open this bag and I pick this thing up that's on the ground. Now this thing was his pair of drawers, right? His skivvies. His tighty-whities. Except they weren't white. Nor were they simply stained. They were clumps of shit all up in his drawers, in his Alice pack, inside his wall locker. And I go and I stick this thing right in his face. I'm like, what the hell is this? And at this point, I've completely had enough. I'm like, you dirty son of a bitch. You are no longer going to sleep in this room. And so I start taking all of his crap and I start hauling it outside and I'm throwing it over the catwalk out into that common area. All of it. His uniforms, his dress uniforms, his service uniforms, all of his gear. Throwing out his sheets and his pillow. I'm like, you're going to go set up that shelter half out there in the woods. We had a little wood line similar to this that was on the other side of that common area. And it's just going to be you. And you're going to stay out there until you have proven that you're not a dirty little pig. And when I say that I probably look like the Tasmanian devil, I'm being a little conservative. I was ruthless in this moment. All sorts of expletives coming out of my mouth, right? And of course, his roommate, this was a two-man room, was just standing there, and they're both standing there at parade rest, eyes huge, wide open, mouth, jaw open. At the wrath that Stoker is leaving inside of this room. And I happen to glance up above, and I see that there is a ceiling tile that is cracked open just a little bit. I'm like, what the hell is that? So I take that ironing board, remember he was ironing his ironing board, and I go place it underneath that ceiling tile, and I hop up on it. I was a little bit lighter back in the day. And I push open the ceiling tile. Maybe I wasn't standing on the ironing board. I don't know. But that's what I remember. I'm standing on something. And I reach in and there's a trash bag. And I empty out this trash bag all over his room. Now what do you think was in that thing? Yeah. A bunch of dip cans and beer cans. And of course this young devil dog, this boot, is only like 19 years old. I got you now. You ain't doing shit about this, because if you do, you know what's going to happen to you? You're going to get a dadgum Article 15. We're going to give you some UCMJ. Some non-judicial punishment is coming your way if you ever open up your dadgum stinking mouth. Now about that time, and of course I'm not talking all polite and calm, like 11 on the Richter scale, right? My battle buddy is on the catwalk and he knocks on the door. He's like, hey, Battle, let me talk to you for a minute. So I step outside and, hey, what's up, bro? He's like, down in that common area, they're giving a going away party for the company gunny. You may want to calm it down. Now that gunny, he was a bad dude, man. He was a bad dude. He had been serving in the Corps for a long time. Of course, at this period of time, in the mid-90s, all of our seniors were Vietnam veterans, right? All of our first sergeants, all of our sergeants major, all of them. They'd been around the block. They had chewed some dirt. They had seen some shit and done some shit. And Gunny was in Beirut when it was bombed. It was a horrible day. He was a little psycho. And he's down there, and I don't think the first sergeant was down there. Some of the other platoon sergeants and seniors. And so I look at Lo, I'm like, you're going to get this crap picked up. And you're going to move out there to the woods. And you're going to stay there until I tell you otherwise. Well, unbeknownst to me, when I'd moved that ironing board, I know I'd moved the ironing board. Whether or not I stood on it may be subject to debate. That iron had fallen, and it had fallen on the brand new carpet that the company gunny had bought for all of the rooms, and it had burned a hole straight through the carpet onto the tile. Well, not only did that young devil dog not say anything, they ended up rearranging some furniture in there so that that burn mark was underneath his wall locker. Next day I gotta go see the first sergeant, and he's starting to read me the riot act about what kind of crazy SOB I think I am. And after I told him what I found in his Alice pack, in that trash bag, you know, it was a pass at the time. The stories like that happen all the time, and that's just one example of some corrective actions, if you will, that Stoker had taken. Now, in 2022, you know, my actions probably would not go over so well. I don't know if I was the first sergeant. I mean, I'm not going to tell you what I would do or say. But, you know, I never put my hands on him. And I don't even recall at the time, you know, we smoked some dudes. Some of the stuff was hazing. You know, you go through and you get pinned to the next rank, whether you become an E2, E3, corporal, sergeant, staff sergeant, whatever. All those ranks got pinned on. As soon as you became a corporal, you walked through the gauntlet. So all the other corporals and sergeants, they would line up face to face, and you had to scoot from one end down through the other as they were banging in those blood stripes on your legs, just kneeing the crap out of you, you know. Of course, in 1997 or 98, there was a Dateline special about pinning wings on, and so all of that stopped. All of it stopped. Now, what was interesting is you fast forward to about 2014. I'm sitting in Iraq at Al-Taqatum, and the senior enlisted advisor at Al-Taqatum was actually a fellow student of mine. He was a brand new Marine, and of course I was a little bit more of a retread. Because I'd gone up to Fast Company when I had re-enlisted, so we'd gone through the security force school, the gunslinger school at the same time, in about 97, 98, somewhere in there. Well, we were in this school together, right? And so I went on to Fast Company, he went on somewhere else, I got out, he stayed in, I come back in the Army, and I deploy and he deploys, and we link up face to face. That shows you just how small the military is sometimes. And we sit there looking at each other, and it was pretty... It took us a while to put two and two together, because it had been over 20 years, you know. And there I am at the time, you know, a sergeant first class. And what was interesting at the time, because again, you know, things had changed from 98, again, when that Dateline special had come out, moving through, and everything stopped in the Marine Corps, man. No hazing, none of that crap was authorized, and was strongly disciplined at the time. So fast forward about 2 decades, 2.5 decades, and I'm sitting in Iraq, in Al-Taqatum, old TQ. Let me know if you've ever been there. And of course it's run by a Marine Corps detachment that's there. And these dudes was crazy. I remember old Sam Stone Street and a couple other dudes. We're talking about their inability in the Corps anymore of being able to make people push. I remember at one point in time I could make a Marine push for corrective training, and then it changed and I could make him push, but only if I was pushing, and then it just all stopped altogether. Well, in the Army, of course, it's authorized to use physical exercises as corrective training. So I said, oh yeah, well, watch this. I was like, hey, Taylor, front leaning rest position, hoo! And of course, I give him an in cadence and he starts pushing. And they're just like, oh my God, dude, you can't do that. I'm like, actually, I can. and I will, and I did. But this ebb and flow of things constantly changing and coming unchanged and changing again, it's very fascinating to see. Of course, when I came in the Army, I had very little expectations, right? One of the reasons why I didn't go back in the Corps, and there's a couple reasons. One, I wasn't going to be that Lance Corporal again, because that's what they would have brought me in at. Army brought me in as a specialist. Army's got more duty assignments and locations, and I didn't want my memory of what the Corps was to be different than what it is. Does that make sense? And so I did expect, and I knew that the Army was different than the Marine Corps, so I could come in, clean slate, no judgment, no stereotypes, no preconceptions. My one preconception was that I expected the Army to be a T at going to war in 2010. I expected the focus of unit level training, regardless of unit, regardless of MOS, to all be generated and prepared for going to Iraq and Afghanistan. Now, what I found in 2010 and 2011, that was not quite the case, and I was a little rough around the edges. That young specialist, that old specialist, right, and that brand new buck sergeant in the Army, I didn't know how or what hat to put on, so I just put on the me hat, and that was the best me that I could, and I was super lucky that I had some platoon sergeants and first sergeants that had been around for a minute. Probably came in back when I came in, right? And they enabled me to be me. They helped shape and shift some things to the left and to the right, and gave me some parameters and helped ring me in. But I was never a person that you have to, and I say this all the time, like I would rather have an NCO or a soldier that I have to hold back as opposed to kicking the ass to move forward. I would much rather have somebody who had determination and grit, and maybe was a little rough around the edges, but was passionate about what they did. That I could bump left and I could bump right. I could hold them back a little bit. That's what I need. That's what I want. Hold back a little bit. Show you the ropes of what it means to be a non-commissioned officer, as opposed to having somebody with no drive, no will, no determination, and constantly having to kick them in the teeth to get them to push forward. Well, we were not that way in 2010. That was not my experience. I'm not saying that other units weren't or aren't that way or whatever. But that first unit was not focused about going to war. In fact, when we were going to the field one time, I had issued a packing list because I figured that was the right thing to do to my team, because my higher echelon wasn't giving me one. So I said, you know what? I don't care about what they are doing or not doing. I don't care what people to my left and to my right are doing or are not doing. I'm going to do the right thing by myself and for those who are in my charge. So I gave them a packing list and I said, listen, team, if it's on this packing list, you will take it and we will do a layout. If it is not on this packing list, you will not take it. Well, one of the things that was not on my packing list was things like cell phones, game stations, computers, any personal electronic devices, right? And that broke some stinking hearts, man. I'm telling you, that broke some hearts. So we get out to the field, man, and we start grinding, and my team's irritated. And we start going through our crew drills. We start fighting. And when I say fighting, I mean training, right? And we start getting after it. And the certification and the validation comes, and they completely smoke the hell out of it, man. Number one in the company. Well, after they got that win, all of a sudden they turned from being salty to looking at everybody else, because they were all going to the store and to the shop at and getting Domino's pizza delivered and playing on their phones and playing their Witches of Wonderland or whatever it is that they were playing, right? They went from being salty, from not having to experience that, to being proud to being a little arrogant, right? To looking at those who could not go a couple weeks without that crap, and they were looking down at them a little bit. Not that they were worse off or better than, but like, look at what we accomplished because you did what you did and we did what we did. And what we did worked, and we won, and we kicked your ass. That was a great time. That was a great time. So I don't know, team. I think, as I look back, and even as I look to the present, I think ultimately that's the thing, right? Doing the best job that you can by yourself and by those who are in your charge, regardless of what the folks around you are doing, regardless of some of that direction that you are getting or are not getting. I hope that you have some folks who are kind of shaping your direction, right? Giving you some lines of effort and bumping you back in line a little bit. Because we're all going to make mistakes as we keep doing this thing called leadership. But I think if I could leave you with anything, be a little more aggressive. Take a little more pride and ownership in who you are and in your team. Man, I'm so deeply looking forward to your comments down below as we talk a little story and continue to grow this community that leans in on each other and our shared experiences, our lessons learned, and things that we need to do to improve our foxhole. That way we can master our craft and develop our tactical virtue. Man, I appreciate all you guys. Until then, you stay out there, you keep grinding, and you stay stoked.